upon a time, there was a boy named David who worked in the fields. He was just like doing stuff with sheep. He was basically like a shepherd, but he wasn't.
Samuel went over to David's house and asked his dad for like a guy, and God were like, oh, not this brother, not this brother, not this brother, not this brother. And Samuel asked, is there any more brothers? And the dad showed David, and so God was like, ooh, this is the guy. And so he anointed him with the oil. And then his brothers went off to battle the Philistines.
Their dad comes to tell David to bring them some food. David probably brought a steak,
Tacos, beans, hot dogs, and fish.
And oranges and apples and a pineapple and blueberries and strawberries and bananas and chicken.
and water or something like that.
Then bring the food to his brothers.
And so he was like, here's food, brothers.
Thank you so much, David.
While he was hanging out with his brothers and eating the food with them, he saw Goliath.
A giant
That's the Philistines, dude.
He was a bully, and he was really, really big and strong. He said, "Who would fight me?"
You can hear them from a mile away.
I'm terrified!
And he tells them, why aren't you fighting Goliath or something like that?
The giant told them, send one man, who would it be? Ha 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 ha.
David was like, I'm gonna battle him because everyone else is scared.
I'll do it. I'll fight the giant.
And so he grabbed some stones.
No, he went to the king to tell him.
The king was like, oh yeah, you can do it. And so the king started putting all this armor on him.
I think I look like I'm a tin can in this thing.
This is too big. I don't like it.
And he just decided to go plain on him.
Like a t-shirt and shorts and flip-flops.
Because he was brave and he knew that God was bigger, so he didn't need to wear it.
And then got a slingshot, get some stones from a creek, and then goes to fight Goliath. Who will fight?
I will.
Are you coming to attack me with sticks?
You're so mean and you're such a whitehead. I'll push you.
You are so little and you can't do nothing. Ha 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 ha.
You are so wrong about that.
David, swing that swingy thing around. And then before he did that, he put in rocks in it.
You think you're gonna beat me? You're so short, and you think you're just gonna kill me with with 5 stones. You're hilarious.
He spun the thing around with one of the stones in, and it landed right here on his forehead, and then he fell down.
The earth probably just started shaking.
Like probably a scale 1 to 10, how much it hurt. Probably like a 9.9. I think he just grabbed Goliath's sword and then cut off his head. He just probably cheered, and then the rest of the team just cheered too.
He's gone. Yay, David, we love you. Yay, David!
That's my brother!
That's my sibling right there. He's awesome.
The Philistine side, I think they would start running away because they were scared of David. No! Why did this happen?
Screaming.
Oh no!
No, I don't want him to defeat me.
Get me out of here. I don't want to be slaves.
Me too.
That is the story of David and Goliath.
The end.
I think she's done.
Well, David and Goliath, you just heard the story. Not actually sure why I'm here. We just got told the story, so I think we should just pray. Dear Lord, no, I'm just kidding. Hey, I'm so glad that you're here today. You've probably heard that story already, though. David and Goliath. Have you heard this? David and Goliath. This legendary bout is, without a doubt, the most famous showdown of all time. Bigger than Frazier versus Ali, the Americans versus the British, Luke Skywalker versus Darth Vader, Godzilla versus Kong, the list goes on. David's victory over Goliath has become the rallying cry for underdogs everywhere. The epic triumph of the small shepherd boy over the gargantuan giant Goliath is a metaphor for improbable victory when the odds are stacked against us. And we love it. We eat this kind of stuff up. Underdog stories help remind us of the qualities that we wish we had most and the ones we find admirable in others. Take the Rocky movies, for example. In the early 70s, Sylvester Stallone was trying to break into Hollywood. With only $106 to his name, he was forced to sell his dog for $40 in order to make ends meet. One night, while he was watching a boxing match, it gave him the idea for Rocky. The matchup was Muhammad Ali versus Chuck Wepner. Who in the world is Chuck Wepner? Stallone didn't know either at the time, but when the Bayonne Bleeder put the champ on the mat in the 9th round, he had his movie. 3 days later, the script for the original Rocky was finished, and he pitched it to a couple of producers soon after. They loved the movie, but they didn't love Stallone playing Rocky. So they offered him $360,000 for the script. And yet, despite having only $106 to his name and selling his dog, remember, Stallone refused. He knew he had to be Rocky Balboa. Eventually, the producers relented, and they gave him a $1 million budget for the movie. Now, even in the 70s, a $1 million budget for a movie was small, but today, it's basically nothing for a movie. Still, Stallone and his team made it happen. And having secured the payday for the movies, he went and bought his dog back for a cool $15,000. Rocky would go on to receive 9 Oscar nominations and 3 wins, including Best Picture, and Sylvester Stallone was instantly a household name. It's a wonderful story of overcoming the odds and having the confidence it takes to make your dreams come true. Stories like these inspire most of us because we want to be the kind of people who go toe-to-toe with adversity and know that we can overcome it, like Stallone did, like David did. But the truth is while they are inspiring, neither of these epic tales are very relatable for people like you and me, are they? Now, it's true that someone might one day have a story like the Rocky movie, and if that's you and you make it big in Hollywood, then more power to you. In fact, I'd like to be included in the credits as having inspired you to make it happen. I'll be looking for it. But almost none of us are going to find ourselves in Hollywood with an award-winning script. More so than that, literally none of us will ever find ourselves on the battlefield with a sling and 5 smooth stones, head-to-head with someone who's 9 feet tall. So other than the inspiration we get from David conquering the giant, is there anything else we can learn from the story? The truth is while we might not have a Goliath in our path, we all face adversity that often feels too large to overcome. It comes in the form of health crises that seem dire. It shows up when we find ourselves in financial ruin, not knowing how we'll ever get out of it. It appears when we feel empty and without purpose. We convince ourselves that there's no beating it. We see it when we feel confused about life and are unsure where to go, or when we see our families falling apart right before our eyes. All of these things make the way forward seem like too formidable a foe to fight. Now, there aren't many things I can guarantee about this life, But here's one thing I can. You're either facing a giant in your life right now, or you will in the future. And there's no way around it. There are no exceptions. And since it's not a matter of if, but when, then we best do what we can to prepare ourselves for it. And David's Goliath story of defeating the giant can help get us there. The battle between David and Goliath is found in the book of 1 Samuel. Now, we're not going to rehash the story because as far as the actual plot points of the story go, the kids did a fantastic job of telling it already. But I do want to hone in on a few key aspects of the story that don't often get noticed or talked about when we tell it. See, before David arrives on the battlefield, we're told that Goliath comes out and challenges a fighter from the Israelite camp every morning and every night. And he does this for 40 straight days while the Philistine and Israelite armies stay camped on either side of a valley. And as strange as this tactic sounds to you and me, this 1v1 challenge was actually pretty common in their day. Hollywood movies that depict ancient warfare make it seem like a total bloodbath between two sides who would rather do nothing than fight. And while I'm sure there were instances of this, oftentimes big battles would be settled in a duel between one person from one side and one person from the other. Whoever won would claim victory for their nation, and both sides would simultaneously avoid mass casualties. So that part's not the strange part here. What is strange about this particular instance is that for 40 days, no one from Israel accepts the challenge. And we know it's because they were intimidated by Goliath's size, but come on. You think there'd be some sort of cutoff, right? Like if no one steps up in a week, they forfeit. I mean, heck, if I'm late on filing my taxes, I get hit with the 5% late fee immediately. There ain't no grace period to speak of, much less 40 days. And yet, for 40 days, no one steps up. No one can foresee a way to defeat Goliath. He's too big, too powerful, too strong. That is, until David arrives. David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine." He's talking about Goliath. "Your servant will go and fight him." Saul replied, "You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth." See, there it is. Saul alludes to why no one has gone out there yet. Goliath's a warrior, the best of the best, and he has been since he was very young. He's too much for any of us to handle, much less you, shepherd boy. When faced with giants in our lives, we tend to tell ourselves the same sort of thing. You say, "Oh, there's no way out of the financial hole I'm in. I'm too far gone. I'm too far behind. Maybe a year or two ago, it could have been different, but now the burden's too much." Or when our marriages are falling apart, we say to ourselves, "I don't see any good way forward. There's been too many things said or feelings hurt that we can't take back. I'm not sure if I'll ever be able to trust my spouse again. I think this is the end." How about when life feels like it has no meaning or we have no place in it? We might say, "What's the point of trying to go on? Even if I do something to try and make something out of myself, there isn't anywhere for me to go. I don't matter enough. I think I'll give up." These battles and others are silently fought every single day by countless people. And I believe that this is one reason the David and Goliath story inspires us, because we all wish we had the confidence in the swagger to see our problem, our giant on the horizon, to say to it, no one panic, I'll take this on. No one lose heart, I've got this. In fact, David doubles down on his "I've got this" mentality as he continues to talk. He continues and says to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep." He's talking about himself. "When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine," which is really just an insult at Goliath, "will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God." Now, fellas, all right, Having a pair of stories like these would be the absolute dream, wouldn't it? I mean, I don't know about you. Maybe I'm the only one, but I would share these stories everywhere I went. Nowhere would be off limits. I'm serious. Like if I was in line at the grocery store, oh, hey, how you doing today? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this one time, fought a lion with my bare hands. No joke. Killed it with a swift strike to the face. Should have been there. Or how about a kid's track meet? Oh, wow, your daughter killed it out there. Way to go. I mean, killing a bear with a judo chop to the jugular is quite a bit more difficult, which I've done, by the way. But, I guess she did fine. Like that kind of confidence, this is the confidence that inspires us. And if David stopped right here, he went out and he defeated Goliath right after this, it would still be an inspiring story like Sylvester Stallone's. But that's all it would be. And when it came to you and I facing our real life giants, it wouldn't be much help. It's what David says next that changes everything. He flips the I've got this script on its head. He pulls the rug out from under Saul and everyone who would tell his epic tale for generations to come. And in it, he gives us keys to face whatever we're against right now and to come. He says this, the Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. Now, I cannot overstate the importance of these words from David in the story. More than the actual slaying of Goliath himself, this single sentence holds three key components to facing our giants. The first we're going to talk about today is humility. Humility. David had the humility to know that he was not able to face Goliath alone. Apart from God, David knew he'd lose. And I know it doesn't necessarily seem that way when you quickly read the story. I mean, just a moment ago, David seemed to be tooting his own horn, talking about how he slayed lions and bears, patting himself on the back for all that adversity he survived. But that's why verse 37, the verse we just read, is so critical, because it gives all the credit for all of that to God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. When I noticed this got me seriously hyped when I was thinking about today, because I never given it enough attention until now. I've heard this story all my life, but I had never given this as enough attention, because the use of the word rescue here is no accident. It's no accident, because think about it for a moment. What kind of people need rescuing? Drowning people need rescuing. People trapped in a burning home need rescuing. People in severe car wrecks need rescuing. People who are lost in the wilderness need rescuing. People who have no perceivable way out of the situations and scenarios they find themselves in need rescuing. Now, you may not be drowning underwater, but some of us are drowning in debt. You may not be trapped in a burning home, but some of us have set our marriages on fire because of lies, abuse, neglect. None of you are presently lost in the actual wilderness. Instead, for a few of us, the trajectory of our lives feels like wilderness. No discernible direction, no goal, no purpose. What kind of people need rescuing? We do. We will all need rescue in the future or need it right now. And as I said, there's no way around it. So when the time comes, the rescue we need begins with humility. You and I need to realize that we cannot do it by ourselves. We need the humility to understand that if something or someone doesn't step in and save us, we're not going to make it. And that's really hard for me to admit that. It really is. And I bet it's hard for you too, because from really early on in our lives, we're taught by both words and actions that we need to do it by ourselves. We need to keep the hard stuff for only us and play it cool. Don't let anyone in. Don't show anyone you're struggling. You don't need help with this. You're the only one who can do anything about it anyway. So sweep it under the rug. Keep it within the family. Act normal. Do it yourself. All the while, we silently succumb to our struggles. And sometimes humility to know we can't do it alone is even harder to reach because the idea of keeping it to ourselves or handling it alone gets disguised with a misplaced sense of caring for somebody else. Like, how about this? I'm not going to tell my wife about my addiction because it's going to hurt her feelings. It'll devastate her. Our relationship isn't that bad. We're doing fine. If I bring it up, it might ruin everything, and things are actually pretty good right now. Besides, I can stop anytime. Or how about this one? I have self-worth issues that occasionally lead to suicidal thoughts. But I shouldn't tell mom or dad. I don't want to scare them or worry them or have them think differently of me. I feel okay today. I can handle it. Sometimes we say it like this: I honestly don't know how I'm going to pay my bills, but there's no way I'm going to tell anybody. I don't want anyone to feel like they have to help me, or I don't want to worry my kids. I just need to pick up a second or third job. I can do this. All of this, it feels noble. And in the moment, it makes you believe you're doing someone else a favor by not burdening them with your own issues. They've got their own issues. I don't want to put mine on them. But ultimately, all you're doing is building a house of cards. And eventually, the facade you've created will come crashing down as long as you resist the humility of admitting you can't do it alone. Like David, we have to come to terms with the fact that we cannot face our giants on our own. And that's okay. It's okay. Jesus said it this way in John 15, I'm the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. Long before Jesus came, David understood this truth about God. And he understood it by both looking behind at his past, over the lion and the bear, and looking ahead at his future struggle. He understood that he couldn't do it alone. He needed a rescue. He needed God. And so do we. But this amazing, incredible verse in Samuel 17 is not done teaching us. Another key component we find here is David's supreme confidence. Confidence. See, David was simultaneously humble enough to know he couldn't do it alone and confident to know that God could. This confidence is littered throughout the narrative. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hands of this Philistine. See, it's not a question of if God will rescue him. That's a done deal in David's mind. He's going to make it happen because God's going to do it. See, remember when David arrived on the battlefield, he said, hey, nobody panic. Nobody panic. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to fight him. And by itself, he's small. So this sounds like an overconfident kid trying to play the hero, to be an adult and to make something happen. But in context with the rest of the story, we learn that David's confidence doesn't come from belief in his own abilities or merit, skill, or achievements. That confidence is rooted in God's ability, God's merit, God's skill, and God's achievements. And David makes this painfully clear when he finally faces Goliath just before their epic bout. David said to the Philistine, you come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. You can hear the music swell up right here. It gets really intense. This day, the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day, I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and to the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. He's going now. Can you just hear it? The strings in the back? It's getting so intense. Whew. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's. And he will give all of you into our hands. So epic, so epic. But as epic as this is, notice, don't get lost in the epicness. Notice here that at no point does David claim victory for himself outside of the context that God is the one who will give it to him. At no point Does David claim his own victory outside of the context that God's going to be the one to do it? And like David, our confidence needs to be in God's ability to see us through, to conquer our giants. The most effective way to be confident in God's rescue in the midst of our struggles is to do what David did. Look back. Look back on your life to see where God has rescued you before. Remember how at that time you thought you'd never make it, but then God showed up and you did. There might be a giant in front of you today, but God already rescued you from the lion and the bear back then. So he can do the same in your life now. And if you're still exploring your faith, you may see this as an impossible task. How can I look back and see God when I'm not sure he's even real? How can a God who doesn't exist help me? And I understand that. And without the baseline of belief, I'd imagine it'd be quite difficult to do this. But let me just offer this. Ask someone else their story. Ask someone here today about how they've seen God move against their giants in their past. And when you do, give their story a chance and listen. After that, ask someone else, then someone else. If you feel like you don't have stories of God's rescue from your own life, which I would argue you do, but that's for another day, then hear somebody else's. Listen to somebody else's. Let it inspire and challenge you to think differently than you do right now. Learning to have confidence in God to pull you through, it takes time, but try it. You might just realize that he's been carrying you all along. Recently, one of our pastors received a message from a family dealing with a pretty major crisis. Now, we've reduced it in length just a little bit, but in it, the parent writes this: I'm sitting here trying to figure out how we will all wrap our heads around what has transpired in the last 3 weeks. It becomes so clear to me that God has been with us. I don't say that lightly. There are many situations that have happened where we've gotten help that is just divine. I know this doesn't guarantee any result, but it does give us faith that we're being held. Thank you for praying. This story right here, this is exactly what I'm talking about. This person has been able to look back on everything they've been through and see how God's been moving in it, just like David did. Despite not knowing what the future holds, they've come to understand that God can do it because he's done it before. And these kinds of stories are all around you, taking shape in the lives of the people you see every day. So ask them about it and let their stories give you hope that one day you'll be able to tell your own. We say it all the time around here. God is always working. He's always working. And when we have confidence to know that God can do it, and the humility to admit that we can't without him, then we'll have all the tools we need to step out with courage to face our giants. And this is the ultimate goal, right? If we have humility and confidence, but don't actually engage in the hard work of overcoming whatever it is we're going through, then nothing changes. If David doesn't step out on the field of battle, Goliath never goes down. Eventually, the Philistines would have advanced on the Israelites and easily claimed victory. David needed to turn his humility and confidence into practical action. He did so by picking up his sling and stones. Now, you and I, we can't sling rocks at our giants. Instead, we have to find tools of our own, ones that work for us. For some of us, it might be an investment in books on how to create and manage a budget, or courses on eliminating debt altogether. For others of us, it might be therapy. Seeking professional help for a legitimate sickness is something we all do. But when it comes to our minds, we see it differently. But it's not. Instead of seeing it as unnecessary or weak, see it as possibly your most effective weapon against your mental giant. For others still, it's as simple as a phone call to a trusted friend or mentor with an admission. Here's what I'm facing, and I don't know what to do next. Can you help me figure it out? Oftentimes, this is all we need in order to begin the journey toward defeating our giants. So whatever it is for you, know this: your giant can be beat. Your giant can be defeated. It can be overcome. And if you and I will have the humility to know we can't do it alone, the confidence to know God can, and the courage to stand and fight, we'll have everything we need to be like David and win. Your story doesn't have to be an underdog story. Like David, you can be the unanimous favorite in your battle against your giant. So may you have the humility to understand that you can't take on the giant alone, and to know that it's okay to admit it. May you have unwavering, unshakable confidence that God can claim victory. And although what we want isn't promised, He's faithful to be with us and be by our side. Then, armed with humility and confidence, may you have the courage to stand and fight your giant, knowing that it's not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, but the battle belongs to Him.
As I walk through the shadow, your love surrounds me. There's nothing to fear, for I'm safe. So when I fight, I'll fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Every fear I lay at your feet. I sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. And if you are for me, who can be against me? Jesus, there's nothing impossible. Come on. When all I see are the ashes, you see the beauty. Oh. When all I see is the cross, God, you see the empty tomb. When I fight, so when I fight, I'll fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Every fear I lay at your feet. I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadows, you win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. Almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadows, you win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. Yeah, almighty fortress, you go before
recognize we cannot face our giants on our own. And that's okay. Like David, let's leave here today with the humility to know that we can't do it on our own, but with the confidence to know that God can, and with that, the courage to stand and fight. The battle is not yours. The battle belongs to God. But we're here to listen if you're stuck or if you need help. If you need encouragement and reminders of how God is at work in every circumstances, we have video stories and articles on our website for inspiration. So check those out, and we'll see you back next week as we continue our David series.